Did you know that Chiron, the asteroid, which represents our wounding? Nobody wants to talk about wounding. Nobody really wants to address wounding, and yet we have to because it affects us so deeply. But did you know that Chiron in our charts is not just about our personal childhood experiences and the things that set us back? It also relates to something else, which I'm going to share with you here in a minute. But it's essential that you understand Chiron and you understand its function in your life because it is lifelong work. You're going to be working with this archetype from conception all the way to death. So I'm going to explain it for you. But before I do that, I am Notha Perkins of Electra Astrology. This is Awakening with Astrology. I am teaching you astrology, not just sun signs and moon signs and what it means, but I'm teaching you how to use astrology and the archetypes that are associated with each sign as an entryway into understanding your own psychology. Sometimes when we start looking at our problems and the things that we need to heal and our communication patterns and our emotional issues, it's really big and it's very daunting and we don't really know where to start. But with astrology, you can pinpoint and go into a very specific area. In the case of Chiron, we're going into specifically the wound, the childhood wounding that ultimately informs the entire healing trajectory of our whole life. And I have done 2 Chiron episodes before this. So if you're interested in this, make sure that you listen to those. There'll be one more at some point following this. So if you like my style and you would like to work with me privately, or you want to get your hands on my free Astrology as a Superpower ebook, you can go to electraastrology.com. I'm going to put the link below if you're watching on YouTube, and if you're listening on the podcast Star Narratives, the link is in the show notes. And of course, make sure that you like and subscribe so that you can find me again and pass this podcast on to anybody that you think might enjoy it as well. So what I mentioned earlier, Chiron relates not just to your own childhood experience, but it also relates to what's going on in the collective, in the culture, from the time that you're conceived. And then, of course, our young life is where we are the most impacted by our Chiron wounds. As I've talked about in previous episodes, Chiron wounding relates to the things that typically happen to us so many times over and over in our childhood that they get lodged almost like a splinter, and they cause things like low self-confidence or natural sense of feeling alone or disconnected. Sometimes it's wounding around our power, around our identity. Sometimes it's a lack of nurturing, emotional wounding, and on and on. And I'm actually going to take Chiron through the signs so that you can get a sense of what every generation is going through. Because if we look at Chiron and say we're impacted by what's happening culturally when we are in utero and growing, then of course, Chiron is going to impact specific generations, whole entire swaths of people that are going to be dealing with those bigger cultural issues. And why is it important to know this? Because we are in relationship with people of all ages. You might be parenting right now, and it would be helpful for you to understand your child's Chiron sign and what their generation is dealing with, and ultimately the wound that that generation is going to need to work on healing within each of us. Maybe you have parents, maybe you have a partner, colleagues. It's good to have a general idea of what each Chiron generation is working with, because we, as wounded healers ourselves, we are learning how to heal ourselves so that we can help heal others. And knowledge is power. The more that we understand about what each of us is going through, the more that we can show up with the healing medicine if that's something that we have access to. And I would say if you have found this podcast, you're probably somebody that has some healing powers. You probably relate to being a wounded healer yourself. And like we say, when you are a wounded healer, you will, of course, have many wounds that you have had to heal and that you are still healing over your life. And that can be really hard. But once we learn how to heal something, then we have the body of knowledge. We become the healer ourselves, and we bring it out and we bestow our gifts on others. For some of us, that's going to be just the gift of delivering wisdom. For others, it's going to be the gift of literally being a doctor or an herbologist or an acupuncturist, somebody that is bringing literal remedies For other people, it's going to show up as being the friend that everybody just goes to for support. For some, it will show up in healing your lineage. When you can heal yourself, your children don't have to go through the same stuff. So we are all gifted with some very specific things that we're here to heal, and subsequently our gifts that we are then able to bring out into the world. If you are watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see some slides. And if you are listening on the podcast, I'm going to go ahead and just verbally walk you through it. But we're going to start off with Chiron in Aries. And this is a good one to pay attention to because Chiron is currently in Aries and has been since 2018. Now, when Chiron is in the sky, we are all dealing with collective wounding that gets presented to us that we are then seeking to heal. We are all each born with a natal Chiron in a sign in our chart. That relates to our personal wounding and the things that we have come here to work on healing as a result of that wounding. And because the world was going through whatever it was going through in the time that we were conceived all the way until we finally developed the cognition to understand that the things that were happening weren't a result of us being bad or weren't because of something that we did. And this is part of why we say that Chiron wounds are so impactful between conception and about age 8 or 9, because our brains have not developed enough to not take things personally. We're still centering ourselves in the middle of everything. So an angry parent feels very personal. And I should say that with Chiron wounding, sometimes the wounding is totally traumatic, right? It can speak to abuse, but it can also speak to accidents and illnesses. And Chiron wounding doesn't even have to show up from abuse. It can simply be the ways that we ended up feeling less than when we were younger. Like we weren't good enough. We weren't smart enough. We weren't lovable enough. We weren't pretty enough. Like whatever it is that we needed in order to feel like we were enough that we were not receiving, that then shows up as a Chiron wound. In these slides, you'll see that I have it broken down to 3 different things. So the collective healing theme for Chiron and Aries. Now, this is something that we are dealing with right now. We're all underneath this energy. And then, of course, this is also something that was going on in the culture back when Chiron was in Aries. And the last time Chiron was in Aries was in, I believe, 68 to 76. If you were born in that generation, that's Gen X, you were born with Chiron in Aries. And the collective theme, the wound, is that there is this disconnection from who we are. There is a sense that we are not allowed to be an individual that has needs and desires, passion, purpose. We feel as if we are living in a world that suppresses our personal power. So think about that, because we're under Chiron in Aries as I record this in spring of 2025. And if you're listening to this in the future, you can think back, what was going on for me between 2018 and about 2026 in terms of my relationship to my power, my identity. And if you think about what's happening right now in the world, there are many different versions of identity politics where we question, am I allowed to be who I am? Am I allowed to be powerful? Am I allowed to courageously express myself? Now, if you were born with Chiron in Aries, and by the way, you can go to astro.com, pull up your natal chart. You might need to go into extended chart selection and actually choose asteroid Chiron if it's not in there. But you can look up very easily online for free what your Chiron sign is. So one of the things, if you were born with Chiron in Aries, and the children being born now will be working with, this will be showing up for them because that's what we're dealing with in the world, but also within the context of their families as well. They will be working with a sense of invisibility. They will have anger that they will need to learn how to manage and how to deal with. There can be disempowerment, a sense of loss. Essentially, in healing this Chiron wound of Chiron and Aries, you have to look at reclaiming yourself, at really looking at your own identity and saying, who am I? And what are my boundaries? And what do I wish to say yes to and no to? And Am I allowed to be angry about something? Am I allowed to use anger as a boundary? We also, with Chiron and Aries, see a lot of hyper independence. There's a sense of looking around and saying, wow, nobody's going to fix anything for me unless I fix it myself. So these are some things that you might have seen over the course of your life that have come up for repair. And down here at the bottom, I have the personal versus the collective wound. And I wanted to compare and contrast these two. So we're looking at this overarching idea of living in a society that punishes self expression, that discourages courage and individualism. And when we look at the wounds that come out of that kind of collective consciousness, we say, what do we need to do to heal? How can I feel more empowered in my life? How can I continue to show up as me, authentically me? And we're learning how to do that. And one last thing about Chiron and Aries that's important is we're looking at anger, whether we are allowed to feel anger and what we do with our anger when we do feel it. So Chiron and Aries people, and when Chiron is in Aries in the sky, we're all looking for healthy ways to channel and express anger. What is underneath the anger that is there? Do we feel like we have anger? And if so, do we have healthy ways to express it? Let's move to Chiron and Taurus. Chiron, by the way, takes about 50 years to circle the entire zodiac, and Chiron will spend more time in certain signs and less time in certain signs. But Chiron and Taurus people were born into a world where there was a cultural attachment to materialism, and external worth was prioritized over inner value. So a lot of times when I'm talking to Chiron and Taurus people, they will express that they do have issues with materialism, meaning that they feel like sometimes there's not enough money or their worth is somehow connected to their money. Chiron and Taurus people also deal with body image issues, self-worth issues, lack, because Taurus is about abundance and it is a Venus ruled sign. So we want a lot of what Venus has to offer. And Chiron and Taurus people feel that they do not have those Venetian things. They were very likely born into families where worth was determined by something outside of the child. Were you pretty enough? Were you thin enough? And then, of course, looking and comparing and contrasting the wealth of your own family with the wealth of the people around you. This is also indicative of children whose parents maybe didn't have enough money or spent a lot of time talking about money. And so this idea of money and abundance is always something that can generate some fear and, again, a sense of lack. In order to heal this wound, you are looking at ways to feel into what you do have. This is the reevaluation of your value system. If you have a belief that your value is based on how much money you have or your appearance, then you want to work on those and get a deeper understanding of what's really important in your life. And I bet that it has less to do with how much money you have and more to do with feeling into your own personal power and having a healthy body and healthy relationships. You're also here doing your healing work because you are helping to heal this world that we're all in that does confuse value with money and beauty. We've been doing a lot of work on that lately with all of the Venus transits. We're seeing in different ways how we are incredibly abundant, even if we're not wealthy with cash. If you have Chiron and Gemini people have an issue with communication. They felt somehow wounded when they were younger. Maybe they weren't able to communicate in the ways that they wanted. They might have been made fun of. They might have felt censored. And then, of course, they're born into a society where what was prioritized was the mind, your high intelligence. So the personal wounding will show up in ways where you naturally feel misunderstood or silenced. Because Gemini is ruled by Mercury and Mercury is so fast moving, there can also be a lot of natural anxiety for a Chiron and Gemini person. And maybe a sense of being scattered, not being able to hold all of the mental activity and really make use of it. It may show up as a fear of actually being heard. And collectively, it represents society that is fractured and has lost the art of communication, has become not very good at having heart-to-heart communication because it's so mental. It's all about what's happening in the mind. And you know me, I tell you guys often that part of our mission is to learn to control our mind, because our mind is what brings in the most anxiety for all of us. So if you have Chiron and Gemini, you are seeking to be more present and less in the mind. So it's less about all of the swirling thoughts and more about sitting and looking someone in the eye and listening and being in the present moment with yourself and with that person. Chiron and Cancer people, this is the collective healing theme of broken family systems. So maybe this was due to divorces, to a devaluation of emotional intelligence and nurturing. When I work with Chiron and Cancer people, they always report experiences of not really feeling that attended to by their parents. Maybe they just felt a lack of emotional connection with their families for whatever reason. Because the keywords here for Chiron and Cancer are abandonment, emotional neglect, homesickness, longing. So if you have this, and this is your wound, you're looking for ways to feel loved. And of course, loving yourself and loving others, building a sense of safety in your own life is going to be really important for healing your wound. This is a generation that has come in to really do some significant healing work around family systems and things that were passed down the lineage that the family members that came before you were unwilling or unable to heal themselves. So when you are loving yourself and creating safety and sweetness for yourself, ideally then if you end up having your own children, then you're applying that love and attunement to them and you're healing some of those familial wounds. Even if you don't end up having children, it's important that you are learning how to remother yourself. Cancer is always related to the mother. Chiron and Leo, so this relates to the suppression of the joy, the creativity, and the sweet inner child in favor of productivity, high performance. These were kids that generally did not feel special or lovable. These might have also been children that got shut down and told that they were too big or too loud or to stop being so selfish or self-centered. There's personal wounding around feeling shame or feeling invisible and creative blocks. If you have this placement, one of the ways that you're seeking to heal is by indulging in creativity and seeing yourself. Leo is also always connected to the father. Sometimes this speaks to father issues, not feeling seen by your own father, and a fear of not being special or lovable. And the collective wound is a world that praises conformity over brilliance. So there's something important about honoring the things that light you up. I think this is true for all of us. So with this wound, we work to see ourselves clearly and love ourselves and honor all of the beauty and the gifts that we bring to the table. And when we do that work, we then bring it out and we teach the world how to do that. Right now, as I record this, Pluto is in Aquarius, which is the opposite sign from Leo. And so we are working with themes around conformity and around the greater good of the collective, which is great, except that we are all also unique individuals that have skills and gifts and passion. So those of you Chiron and Leos out in the world, when you seek to understand and see and love and appreciate and perform, you are healing a wound that all of us need help healing. Chiron and Virgo people, this is the wounding around perfectionism and needing to fix stuff and constantly self-improve. Chiron and Virgo people feel overworked, underpaid, not good enough, criticized, and they are often working with chronic illness. And that is because Virgo is ruled by Mercury. Mercury is about the nervous system and anxiety. So, like we talked about with Chiron and Gemini, this can cause anxiety and stress, which is what causes so much illness. So, the healing of this is to work at less self-criticism and by proxy, less criticism and judgment of everybody else too. With Virgo, we hold ourselves and others to incredibly high standards and we judge the hell out of them and of ourselves if we don't meet those standards. And it's counterproductive. It keeps us on this hamster wheel, running around trying to achieve approval. And then we get the approval and it doesn't even feel like anything. And we're off to the next thing. So if we look at this as Chiron in Virgo speaks to societies that value productivity over wellness, we're changing that. And as I record this, the South Node is in Virgo. So we are all doing some collective work around looking at productivity over wellness. And what does that mean? And how has that contributed to the dysfunction and the distortion of our human experience as it is right now on the planet? So a Chiron and Virgo person, as you're learning to heal your body and slow down and honor your yes and honor your no. I always say with my Virgos, when I'm reading for Virgo people, you're only supposed to say yes to the things that make you feel alive and excited. And if you're saying yes to something out of guilt or obligation, you're veering off, you're on the wrong track. I mean, Chiron in Libra, these are people that deal with wounding around relationships. It can also relate to injustice and inequality, as Libra does. And this shows up as a wounding, feeling like we were betrayed or we were abandoned, or there were things that happened in our lives that felt really unfair. So if you're somebody that feels like you give more than you receive, or that there's some sort of lack of mutual respect in your relationships, this is what you're here to heal. Chiron and Libra people are here to look at relational issues and say, what are my needs? Do I honor my needs? What are their needs? Do I honor their needs? Do I have relationships that feel equitable and balanced? Do I feel like my relationships are supportive? And if they're not, what do I need to do to heal them? Because you guys are healing relational stuff, and we all need a lot of relational healing. So for each of these Chiron generations, the thing that you have been tasked with, things that happened over and over again in your childhood, that you are now having to confront and work with and heal and purge and do all of this stuff in your adult life, these are the gifts that you're bringing to the collective. Chiron and Scorpio people, this is betrayal, healing of trauma. These are wounds of betrayal, of shame, of abandonment. A lot of times Chiron and Scorpio people will have some significant difficulty because they are here to heal their own trauma around power and control. Chiron and Scorpio can bring in sexual issues, emotional pain, violation. And if this is you, then what you're here to heal is generations of suppressed truth and abuse of power. So when you're looking at your own relationship to secrecy, to deep emotional betrayal, and you're seeking to heal, you may be healing generational stuff. A lot of times when we have power and control issues, or we have deep trauma or addiction in the family, it's come from many generations before us. These things don't just show up. And the Chiron and Scorpio people are the ones that came in with a strong soul mission to clear this stuff so that it doesn't perpetuate into future generations. All right, so Chiron and Sagittarius people. The issue here is that you never felt like people told you the truth. You might also have been surrounded by people that acted superior to you. It's also possible that you were born into a religious family And so there could be spiritual confusion that could arise for you, or disillusionment, or various crises of faith. You're here to heal the misuse of religion and truth. You're here to figure out what the real truth is. And without being dogmatic or righteous about it, you're here to help others. You're here to teach others. Some astrologers do make symbolic connection between Chiron and Sagittarius, because Chiron is the healer and the teacher, and Sagittarius is also the keeper of wisdom, the sage, the teacher. If you have Chiron and Sagittarius, there is much that you're meant to learn about different belief systems. And that helps not only you, but it also helps the world. Chiron and Capricorn people are born into families that might have high expectations about success and performance. These people might feel naturally inadequate or worry that they're going to fail. They might be over responsible, and they have come in to master themselves. The healing happens with self-mastery, which is noticing that burnout doesn't lead you anywhere good. And even when it feels like nothing is enough, it's important to understand that you do have enough. And it's not just about your high achievement. Chiron and Capricorn people are also here to dismantle systems that prioritize results over humanity. Your own nervous system, your mental health, your spiritual health, you are learning how to prioritize that over that drive to succeed. Chiron and Aquarius people are born into families and into a culture that was concerned with fitting in. Sometimes Chiron and Aquarius kids feel like they don't fit in. They are alienated, or they're different. There are issues with finding a community, finding people that they fit. Sometimes Chiron and Aquarius people feel like outsiders, or they feel rejected, or they're seen as being eccentric. And the healing of this comes in overcoming your fear of being different. So Chiron and Aquarius people are learning how to stand out for their own unique selves. They're learning to not be so concerned about what other people think. They're learning that conformity doesn't get them anywhere interesting. And as these people learn to heal themselves, they teach us how to embrace the visionary. Chiron and Pisces people come into the world feeling disconnected. They feel alone and lonely. They might be dealing with wounds around victimhood or martyrdom, confusion, addiction, despair. In order to heal, they have to learn how to become fully grounded. They have to learn how to connect with themselves. They're learning how to reclaim their relationship to higher self. And in doing so, they help the rest of us to do that. There's something really important about a Chiron and Pisces person understanding their compassion, self-compassion, and their empathy, and really in understanding the nature of suffering. And that largely suffering is a choice, because suffering begins in the mind. Pisces is the sign of self-undoing. And Chiron and Pisces people are learning how to step out of self-undoing and step into a relationship with higher power, which is self-supporting. All right, I hope this was helpful. I hope you learned something about Chiron and how our Chiron wound isn't just teaching us about what hurt us. It's also teaching us about what was going on in the world, how it impacted us, and bringing us the medicine so that as we do heal, we're not only healing ourselves, we're helping to heal the collective, because we are all in this together. All right, I hope this was helpful. I'll see you all soon.